Here are 3 players you could take in your fantasy drafts that are all upside and almost no risk. Let's start with second-year wide receiver Rasheed Shaheed. As a rookie last year, didn't start until week 13, but from week 13 on, he averaged 5 targets and 64 yards per game. And while those numbers don't jump off the page and scream upside, again, remember, he was a rookie, making his first starts also in a very low-volume passing offense with Andy Dalton, and I think he even had to play with Taysom Hill for a game or 2 last year. So really wasn't a lot to be had in this passing game regardless. But he's got a very clear path to being a starting outside receiver on this Saints offense because we know Chris Olave is going to be the starting X receiver, outside receiver, pretty much on every single snap. But then who else do they have? Really, it's just Michael Thomas, who's 30 years old and has only played 10 games since 2020. Not to mention last year, the Saints started experimenting with Michael Thomas, using him in more of a flanker role to try to get him softer matchups because, contrary to what a lot of people think, Michael Thomas is no longer an elite real-life wide receiver. So it's not hard to see a path where Rasheed Shaheed is the outside receiver alongside Chris Olave in 2 wide receiver sets, which means he's going to be on the field a ton. Also, Shaheed averaged 17.4 yards per reception in this anemic passing offense last year, which would have ranked second among all wide receivers had he qualified. And he's getting in a QB who's not afraid to chuck it down the field. Derek Carr was 5th in deep pass attempts last year. So when you put those 2 together, a guy who's not afraid to chuck it down the field and a receiver who averaged the second most yards per attempts, you can see how there's room for massive upside here. And I know a lot of people are worried right now thinking this offense isn't going to throw the ball enough, but look, you can't just look at what they did last year and think that's what they're going to do this year. They had Andy Dalton. They had Taysom Hill. I mean, they had nobody at quarterback. They went out and signed Derek Carr for a reason. They didn't sign Derek Carr just to hand the ball off a ton. Now, they're not going to be one of the pass-heaviest teams, but they're going to throw enough. There is going to be enough here for both Chris Olave and Rasheed Shaheed. And the reason why there's no risk with Shaheed, so to speak, is because he's costing you right now a 14th round pick, and in a lot of your drafts, he's not going to cost you a pick at all. He's a guy that in most leagues is going to be picked up off a waiver wire, but you can draft him with one of your last picks, knowing the upside that this guy is going to have. He's going to have massive weekly upside. And if he gets a little bit better in year 2, develops a little bit more of that route running, he might even give you a little bit of consistency to go with that upside. So Shaheed, I love taking him with one of my last picks. He's a guy who's all upside, no risk. Worst case scenario, you drop him and pick up somebody else. All right, let's move on to a tight end now who got a lot of buzz when he came into the league, had a great combine, a good athletic profile, was a good pass-catching tight end in college, and that is Irv Smith. Never really panned out the way we wanted him to. He was kind of showing signs last year a little bit before his season-ending injury, but you got to like his opportunity this year because he landed as a free agent in Cincinnati. And when you look at Hayden Hurst, who has moved on from Cincinnati last year, he ranked 12th in targets per game among all tight ends and 15th in total routes run. That is now going to be Irv Smith's role, and Irv Smith is just a better player than Hayden Hurst. He just absolutely is. When you look at the numbers last year, Irv Smith averaged 2.67 yards of separation per route, which was more than even Travis Kelce. Now, of course, it was on a smaller sample size, but it shows what this guy is capable of. He's a good route runner, a good pass-catching tight end, and now he lands in a great situation because Cincinnati was top 5 in pass play percentage last year, and we know they'll involve the tight end. Hayden Hurst 2 years ago was kind of a waiver wire hero for tight ends, and even last year gave you some weekly value from time to time at the tight end position. He's also entering his age 25 season, which may not sound like a big deal, like, okay, whatever, he's 25, but that is one of the most common ages that tight ends break out in the NFL. This seems to be the year where tight ends finally get it, they finally figure it out and have that breakout season. We could definitely see that from Irv Smith this year. And look, every year we see an undrafted tight end in fantasy become a waiver wire savior for teams in fantasy football. It happens every single year. It's going to happen again this year. Why not Irv Smith? So rather than wait and try to grab him off the waiver wire, if you miss out on Travis Kelce and you don't like the tight ends on the board and you just want to completely punt the position, I have no problem taking Irv Smith in the last round of my fantasy drafts. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people this year, be a breakout tight end, and even if he doesn't, what is the risk? The risk is you drop him and pick up another tight end because you grabbed him with one of your last picks, so who really cares? All right, before we get to my third and final player, I got to let you know, if you're not on flockfantasy.com/endgame yet, you need to be, because you can actually play fantasy football with us and win cash prizes. That's right. We're still filling our final Dynasty League of the year, so if you've been thinking about trying Dynasty, come join us, flockfantasy.com/endgame. Get in that Dynasty League. We have a few more spots, and then we'll be drafting. Also, we're going to do some redraft leagues. All of these leagues are going to be giving away cash prizes to our members on flockfantasy.com/endgame. All you got to do is be a member. You're also going to get a free Endgame t-shirt, plus all the other cool stuff you get on Flock Fantasy, like articles, videos, rankings, everything you need to dominate in fantasy this year. Come try to take our money, beat us in fantasy. flockfantasy.com/endgame. Check it out. Let's end with a QB that I've been talking about a lot, and in some of the sharper leagues, like underdog drafts like that, he does go a little bit higher up, like maybe rounds 9 or 10. But I promise you, in your home leagues or your more casual leagues, nobody is going to draft this guy because they're scared of him as a passer, and that is Anthony Richardson. I don't care about him as a passer. 2 years ago, I said, I don't care what Jalen Hurts does as a passer because this rushing alone can win you leagues. And he tore it up running the ball that year. He was okay as a passer, good enough, had a great season. Now everybody loves Jalen Hurts. Last year, Justin Fields, don't care what he does throwing the ball. In fact, Justin Fields was so bad throwing the ball last year, 2,200 yards and 17 touchdowns. Those are horrendous numbers in today's NFL. And it didn't matter. He finished as a top 5 QB even without playing 2 games because of what he can do with his legs. He set the season record for rushing by a quarterback and won people fantasy championship. And here's the thing about Anthony Richardson. He's a better athlete than Justin Fields. He might be the most athletic, freakish quarterback we've ever seen in the NFL. He just broke the combine. He can do it all with his legs. This is a guy who could absolutely break Justin Fields' rushing record this year and give you 10 touchdowns. If he goes over 1,100 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns, that's basically an RB2 as your quarterback, not to mention whatever he does through the air. And look, I don't care how bad you think he is as a passer. I admit it. He's got work to do. Could he improve? Of course. We've seen guys like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, probably Justin Fields this year. We've seen these guys improve as passers, but even if he doesn't, 2,200 yards and 17 touchdowns for Justin Fields last year, QB5. You're telling me Anthony Richardson, who's probably going to start week 1 because all he's got to do is beat out Noodle Arm, Gardner Minshew, can't get at least 2,200 yards and 17 touchdowns in 2023 in this NFL? He absolutely can. I think he can also hit 1,000 rushing yards, double-digit rushing touchdowns. You're basically getting a running back and a QB in one player, and a lot of you don't care because you just want that statue pocket passer like Tom Brady or Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence, even though Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence do run a little bit. You know, that cute, stand in the pocket, look at that dime he just threw type of guy. But this is fantasy football. You know what I want? Fantasy points. And running quarterbacks give you more fantasy points. So I will take a shot on Anthony Richardson. We've been saying this offseason, got to go QB earlier. You got to get that elite QB, but you never know how early QBs are going to go in your draft. If you missed out on one of those elite QBs, I would just punt the position, grab Anthony Richardson with one of your last picks. And like I was saying with Jalen Hurts, I was telling people, what's the worst that happens? You drop him and stream another quarterback. Same thing with Anthony Richardson. Worst case, if he's a complete bust somehow, you drop him, stream another quarterback, move on. Your fantasy team will be fine. So now you know 3 players who are all upside and no risk, but you need to avoid the players who do have risk. I got you covered with my top 10 busts right here.